The House will come to order. Motions and resolutions.
Her moves that Senate file number 37 be taken from the table.
All those in favor of the Her motion, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed, please say no. Motion prevails. Do you need to report it? Yep. Clerk will report the bill.
Senate file number 37, an act relating to state government, proposing an amendment to the Minnesota Constitution, Article 1, by adding a section providing for equality under the law, the unofficial engrossment.
There's an amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
Scott moves to amend Senate file number 37, the unofficial engrossment. The amendment is coded A15.
The member from Anoka, Representative Scott.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Members, hope you had a nice break outside, got some fresh air. The A15 is clarifying that the ERA will not.
Members, please take your conversations off of the House floor into the retiring room or the alcoves. Representative Scott.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. The A15 is clarifying that the ERA will not eliminate all sex-based distinctions, women-only spaces, places, and opportunities. This amendment allows the state to recognize and protect sex-based distinctions in facilities and programs. This protects and allows the state to provide and fund shelters and programs for the exclusive benefit for women, including ensuring private spaces for biological women to feel safe. The intent of the Federal Equal Rights Amendment was to protect women and to give them equal standing, including the sex-based accommodations. Under the state constitution, the courts have recognized laws based on physiological characteristics unique to one sex, that it doesn't discriminate, it doesn't constitute sex discrimination. However, the proposed constitutional amendment would end this common sense distinction. And Madam Speaker, before I go on, I'm wondering if I could request a roll call.
Seeing 15 hands, there will be a roll call. Representative Scott.
Madam Speaker and members, let's think about what the language of this amendment means. We already have in the state of Minnesota a trans inmate, and he sued, and the headline here that I have is a trans inmate wins health care and will move to women's prison after suing the state. So we have already in the state of Minnesota a trans woman, I guess it is, a biological man moving into a woman's prison. And lest we start saying that nothing could possibly go wrong, we have a story here about a transgender inmate who said he was no threat to women and he was charged with sexual assault after the transfer into the women's prison. I believe this is in the state of Michigan. So we have that to go off of. Members, that's not all. In Scotland scandalized by trans sex offenders in women's prisons as Canada ignores it. Members, President Trudeau was under a lot of pressure to make a change in this policy. The policy that originally allowed for trans women to be in a woman's prison said it resulted in several high-profile examples of women's prison transfers being requested by transgender inmates incarcerated for sexual violence against women. Most notably, this included Isla Bison, a convicted rapist who attacked 2 women under the name Adam Graham before changing gender in prison. So we have that. And then we also have 11 transgender inmates that were sexually assaulted in a male prison. Not a safe place for a woman, a biological woman, to go to a male prison. Another one, a New Jersey trans prisoner who impregnated 2 inmates transfers back to the men's facility. Let's not allow that to happen, folks. The words in this amendment language mean things. Now, let's move beyond a prison. Let's talk about, and Representative Ann New alluded to this last night, a woman named Jane was in a domestic violence shelter, and there was a trans woman in there that was naked in the hallway, and she felt just incredibly unsafe. And then we've probably heard of this happening in other places around the country. I'm not sure if it's happened here in the state of Minnesota or not, but a 17-year-old was scolded for crying over transgender woman's penis at the YMCA. Remember, she was showering after swimming, and there, buck naked, was a man. She said she wrapped herself quickly in the flimsy shower curtain. And but she was excoriated for being upset about it. If that was your daughter, I don't know whose side you'd take. But it's not okay. It's not okay, members. We don't know yet, but I think we actually do. Would the ERA preclude schools from having separate locker rooms and restrooms for girls? We spent a lot of time last night talking about safe places for women, sports, girls' sports teams only, and the protection that offers, and the ability or the opportunity to excel in sports for women and girls. Members, we really need to think long and hard about what we're doing here and what we might be subjecting women to. Women in prisons, I visited Shakopee this summer, the Shakopee Women's Prison, and there are women there that have come from a background where they have been raped, where they have been victims of domestic violence. And here we are making an opportunity for that to happen. What are we doing here? One of government's primary functions is to protect people, to protect the citizens. And so we need to do that. Members, please vote green on this amendment. It's so common sense.
The member from Ramsey, Representative Herr.
Madam Speaker, Representative Scott, lines 2.2 to 2.4 already allows the state to do what this amendment proposes. It just requires the state to use the least restrictive means to achieving compelling government interest. This is a constitutional law standard, and I recommend a no vote.
Discussion. The member from Hennepin, Representative Robbins.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you, Representative Scott, for bringing this amendment. I spoke to some of this last night, but protecting women and girls is what the original Equal Rights Amendment was about, and ensuring they had equality. And this Unequal Rights Act that the majority is proposing will do the exact opposite. It will hurt women and girls in the state of Minnesota. And I appreciate that Representative Herr pointed out the language in 2.2 to 2.4, which is the strict scrutiny test, the compelling government interest test. And I was going to talk about this on a different amendment, but I think because she raised that, it's an important point to bring up now. Currently, in federal law, sex-based cases get intermediate scrutiny, as I talked about last night. And this means that discrimination is allowed, but that the government has to make sure it serves an important policy consideration. So there's 3 layers. It's strict scrutiny, intermediate scrutiny, and then rational basis. So strict scrutiny is the burden of proof is on the government, and there has to be this compelling government interest. Intermediate scrutiny, which currently applies to sex-based discrimination, is for characteristics, and it includes sex and sexual orientation. And the government can almost never treat people differently based on things like race, which is strict scrutiny, but they can treat people differently based on sex if it serves an important policy consideration. And we talked about that last night, how even feminist icons like Ruth Bader Ginsburg and former Senator Hillary Rodham Clinton saw the need for separate spaces for women and girls so that they could thrive. And it has been important to the development of women to have their own sports teams, to compete for their own scholarships, to have female-only domestic violence shelters, female-only prisons. These things are important for protecting women and girls, and we need to uphold that protection. So we are actually undermining the protection for women and girls by, in our state constitution, saying, well, you can only protect women and girls if it reaches the higher level of strict scrutiny, because right now they have this intermediate scrutiny. So we are making it, by the author's own admission, a higher test if you're going to have spaces for women and girls. And it's contrary to federal law, but it also is enshrined in our Constitution that we want to make it harder to protect women and girls. Members, we are going in the opposite direction of what our moms and our grandmothers fought for. I literally just do not understand why this is so important. And so what women and girls have fought for so long is just going to be ripped away, and they will not have the same opportunities that our generation enjoyed. My generation is the first generation to have sports teams and to win scholarships, and I'm not athletic, but my kids had that. I want my someday grandchildren to be able to have women's only sports teams, women's only locker rooms, women's only speaking competitions. I've been a judge for a female speaking competition called Speaking Proudly to encourage women to gain confidence in public speaking, because that's a thing that a lot of girls struggle with, and it's hard to sometimes do it in front of your peers. There's been women's only classes for mathematics, because there's been a lot of studies that show that if you put girls in a segregated girls only math class, they do better than when they're mixing it up with the boys, especially in junior high. There are real good reasons that have survived intermediate scrutiny to allow girls and women to have separate spaces. And if we do this, and we put it in the Constitution under strict scrutiny, that will fall away. And all the women and all the girls in your districts will lose those opportunities that we have enjoyed and that our moms and grandmas fought so hard for. It is so important, members, that you pull back on this. There are ways we can find to have places that trans people feel comfortable too, but it shouldn't be at the expense of women and girls. It should not, members. And so I urge you to adopt this amendment. And I hope, members, that we will not be the legislature that rolls back historic gains that women and girls have made. Thank you.
The member from Ramsey, Representative Finke.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And Representative Scott, I appreciate what your amendment is getting at, especially with the scourge, really, the scourge of sexual assault that is in our prisons right now. The rape and sexual assault are not a trans problem in prisons. It is a prison problem. It is a problem for everyone. And trans women that are in women's prisons where they both legally and morally should be, trans women in women prisons are sexually assaulted at rates 10 times higher than cisgender women. So I just want us to keep in mind that trans women and trans people, trans men as well, non-binary people who have no space in this conversation when we reduce binary gender to everything, deserve safety too. And even when they're in the women's prison, when you put us in a women's prison, we should be there, and we are the targets at 10 times the rate of sexual assault.
Point of order, Madam Speaker. Point of order.
Representative Franson.
Thank you. Could you please remind the body certain words are slurs? Cis isn't considered a slur word, so if we could not use that word, that would be appreciated. Thank you.
Representative Franson, I've heard members on both sides of the aisle use that word. I don't know that word to be a slur, but I think that during this debate, folks should focus on choosing their words carefully to avoid offensive words in debate, which is against House rules. The member from Sherburne, Representative Lawrence.
Madam Speaker, good evening. Members, we have the opportunity tonight to set good policy. In fact, it is our responsibility to set good policy for all residents of Minnesota, all the citizens of Minnesota, and it's a responsibility to take seriously. This amendment we have before us is reinforcing current practices. This is what happens in our schools today. This is what happens in most of our private gyms today. This is practice that has been tested over time. The state is allowed to recognize and protect sex-based distinctions in facilities and programs. Very basic, very benign to this bill, but extremely important to what it enforces. And we have an opportunity to set this in, and instead of allowing a judicial court to decide what our bill means or what the Equal Rights Amendment means, we have a chance to say and spell it out for them and give policy. Now, I stand up as a dad, and my firstborn was a girl, my daughter, my eldest. Yesterday, she celebrated a birthday. And I was hoping to speak yesterday and tell her happy birthday, but today I get to do that a day late. Extremely athletic, a swimmer, excelled at swimming, loved the water. And from the time she was 12 years old, I believe it was 12, I could be wrong, I apologize. But got into water, had swimming lessons, and extremely competitive, swam in the water, trained with boys as they learned the strokes as they went. But in the water, you know, the team trained together in the clubs that she had been involved in. The school offered a swim program and a girls swim program, and which she jumped into, was extremely successful in her high school program, achieved the level of captain, achieved many awards, and had several records, more records than my sons did on the boards there, who were swimmers as well. But had her name, and still has her name in holding a record holder on the boards there. Now she's a coach of the same swim team, girls swim team, which she gets to be a part of. And it's a dream of hers to move not only through the program and have the success that she has as a swimmer, but also to achieve the possibility of coaching that team. Girls have a right to privacy. My daughter has a right to privacy. The girls on her team that she coaches have a right to privacy. My wife, my daughter-in-laws have a right to privacy. My mom, my mother-in-law, and I speak as a dad, a husband, a son-in-law, for the females that surround me in my life right now, that they deserve to be able to walk into a restroom and know that it's a restroom for women. To go to the gym and know that the locker room is just going to be women in that gym. Whether they choose to shower, change clothes, put on a gym suit to train, they deserve to know that when they walk into that room that they're going to be surrounded by females. My daughter, as she coaches her team, should be able to know that in her locker room, her girls which she coaches, whether they travel to another school, whether they are in their school, whether they go to a combination meet or the state finals, that when they're competing on those levels, that her girls are in the locker room with other females. Over the years, my daughter's traveled all over the state, region, to compete. And I don't remember a time I ever had concern of her being in the locker room. I knew there was other females in there with her. I knew there was other female coaches that were responsible in that area. It never crossed my mind that there might be a male in that locker room with my daughter at that point in time. Never once did it cross my mind that there would be. And to my knowledge, she never said there was, and to my knowledge, there never was. And so I was assured that one, her rights were protected. And today we got to think about everybody's rights. We got to think about our female rights in this bill in particular and in this situation. And that's what this amendment does. It just sets aside and says, hey, the facilities that are marked for females, females are going to utilize. The facilities that are marked for males, males are going to utilize. The programs that are set aside for females to compete in, to excel in, are set aside for that. And so it's with this that please support this amendment. Very simple, one-sentence amendment. It ensures that my daughter, her girls on her swim team, when they walk into the locker room, whether it's in their school, whether it's in the school down the street, whether it's at the University of Minnesota, when they have state finals and they're there to compete on the state level, that they're going to be the females that are going to be showering in the same room, getting dressed in the same room, and not have to have a concern that there might be a male in the corner showering, changing with them, amongst them. Please pass this. Please approve this amendment and keep the playing field balanced. It has been that way. Let's continue to uphold that. Madam Speaker, thank you.
The member from Chisago, Representative New Brindley.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members, and thank you, Representative Herr, to pointing us back again to the language on lines 2.2 to 2.4. And in this language, it specifically says any action by the state that denies an individual's equal rights shall be invalid unless. And it goes on to talk about that. The Representative Scott A15 amendment is not about denying rights. The Representative Scott A15 amendment is about guaranteeing rights for girls and women. That's what the A15 is about. So let's add this to this unequal rights amendment to add a little more equality for girls and women. I'm glad that I had a few minutes to look some stuff up, because interestingly, Representative Scott, you were talking about a former transgender prisoner who was in Shakopee who has since been transferred out, but another has been transferred in. Just in January, Bradley Richard Servio was transferred to Shakopee Women's Prison. Servio is in prison for murder, for beating someone they met in a bar with a hammer, beating them to death, and then setting their house on fire to cover up the crime. That's what Servio is in prison for. Not just murder. I can't imagine a more violent murder than beating someone with a hammer. And now Servio is in the women's prison in Shakopee. Other arrests for assault, burglary, theft. But in prison for life for beating someone with a hammer, and now Servio is in Shakopee Women's Prison. I don't buy this language that somehow protecting sex-based space is denying rights. It is protecting rights for women and girls. This is not an exception. This is not an action by the state to deny rights. We should take the A15 amendment and acknowledge that this is about protecting rights. This is about ensuring equal rights for women and girls. This is about ensuring that we are not elevating trans women above biological women. That's what this is about. That's what the A15 amendment is about. Ensuring that biological women are guaranteed safe sex-based spaces. About guaranteeing that my sweet 16-year-old daughter can be in a locker room and not see a male body and not shower with a male body and a penis. That is not appropriate for my 16-year-old daughter. It is not appropriate. And my 16-year-old daughter should be guaranteed the right to a sex-based space where she can be with other biological girls and not have to worry and fear about male bodies in that space. I reject the language in this unequal rights amendment. I reject the idea that by passing the A15 amendment, we are denying individuals equal rights. Because that's what was just said. We were told that we don't need the A15 because we've already got lines 2.2 to 2.4. Nope. Lines 2.2 to 2.4 say that we are denying equal rights. I reject that notion. It is false. It is untrue. It is dishonest, like this entire unequal rights amendment is dishonest. Acknowledge that girls and women deserve safe spaces. Acknowledge that girls and women have experienced trauma at the hands of biological men, and they deserve spaces free of them. They deserve domestic violence shelters free of biological men. They deserve prison spaces free of biological men. They deserve locker rooms free of biological men. They deserve that equal right under the law. They deserve that protection in our very Constitution. They deserve that protection. It is abhorrent to think that they don't deserve that protection. If you vote no on the A15 amendment, you are elevating the rights of transgender women above biological women. That is an unequal rights amendment. If you vote no on this amendment, you are elevating the rights of transgender women above the rights of biological women and girls. That is what you are doing in voting no, and we're okay with that, I guess.
The member from Goodhue, Representative Altendorf.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you, members. Thank you, Representative Scott, for offering this amendment. This is very, very common sense, and I appreciate that you are really looking for the protection of women and girls to have safe spaces that are designated according to their biological sex. One thing I just want to clarify real quick, and I think I talked about this a little bit last night, but again, I think Representative Finke, I'm not sure, but with the transgender, they said that we don't believe that they exist, or that we, basically it's inferred that we hate them, or we're not acknowledging that they exist. And that really could not be farther from the truth. What the problem is here is that we need to acknowledge that women also exist and that women deserve safe spaces. So in 2022 in New Jersey, there is a prison that 2 of the female inmates became pregnant when a transgender person moved into that facility. So these are the type of situations that we're asking that could happen. There's also another lady from my district. She said, as the law would be written, if they had women who had been sexually abused or were seeking a woman's shelter, and a transgender person came to that shelter, that they would have to let that person in. Now, again, the assumption, what I felt was said, was that we do not think transgender people exist, and we do. The problem is there are some people that have bad intentions. There are some people that are predators, and they do not equate. We are not saying that all transgender people are predators at all. That was never our intention. What we are saying, and this is a fact, is that there are bad people with ill intent who could use these situations to become predators. And so they could claim to be a transgender person and seek to go into a woman's only area, like a woman's abuse center, like a woman's prison. And that is the problem. So we're not saying one equates the other, but we are leaving this door wide open to additional problems to happening, which would then hinder the safety of women. Now, I'm just going to tell you a story here, but there was a lady in my district. She told me this story that she was in the Quick Trip in my district, bathroom, which had 3 stalls in it. And when she came out of the stall, there was a transgender person in the bathroom. However, her immediate reaction was just seeing someone who is significantly taller than her, like a foot taller than her, and she said her physical reaction without realizing what was going on was she felt her heartbeat raise, her adrenaline rose, because that is the human reaction that you are in a woman's bathroom and you do not expect to see someone of that height standing right outside of the door when you open the door. And I want you to think about that, members, because that was a person who did not know what was going to happen when she opened the door, and that was her immediate physical reaction. She couldn't help that. That's just how she felt at that moment. And then once she assessed the situation, realized it was a transgender person, and everything was fine. But the point of this is to realize that women instinctively would feel fearful of having someone of that stature opening a door and having them in a space that she felt was just for women. So please understand, this is a physical reaction, a reaction that you cannot help. And a young girl in a school situation could also feel very fearful in this situation. But again, it's not saying one does not equate the other. However, when we do not provide safe spaces for women and girls, that they can be in these safe spaces alone, it does open up the door for people with bad intent to, in a predator-type situation, to pretend to be transgender and to enter these spaces, and now these girls are unsafe. So thank you, Representative Scott, for bringing this amendment. This is a common sense amendment, and we want to make sure that we are protecting women and girls.
The member from Hennepin, Representative Kraft.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I have things to say. I thought a lot about some of the stuff happening last night. It is interesting that that my colleagues on the other side of the aisle are making this ERA discussion about one thing. If you look at the 8 things that are listed of what we're guaranteeing: race, color, national origin, ancestry, disability, sex, gender identity, and sexual orientation. The discussion has been about gender identity. None of you answered Representative Finke's question last night of what would you have trans people do if they're not allowed to be who they are. A quote comes to mind: "The true measure of any society can be found in how it treats its most vulnerable members." That was Mahatma Gandhi. 1 in 4 trans people report having been physically attacked because of their gender identity. 2/3 report being verbally attacked. In a recent survey, more than 80% of trans people report having thought about suicide, and more than 40% have attempted it. Of course, you can find a story about a trans person doing something bad. You know why? Because trans people are people. There are trans people that do good things, and there are trans people that do bad things. Just like there are plenty of cisgendered folks that do good things.
Point of order,
and
Madam
bad
Speaker.
things.
Point of order.
Representative Franson.
Madam Speaker, again, cis is a slur word, and it would be great if representatives did not use that word on the House floor. Thank you.
Representative Franson, I'm sorry, but cis is not a slur word. Representative Franson.
Yes, it is. And I will not argue that, but it is a slur word, so we will not be hearing that word on the House floor. Thank you.
Representative Kraft, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. The words I'm hearing is as if affirming and protecting the civil rights of one group of trans people takes away the rights of others. To me, that has echoes of prior civil rights struggles. And what a dismal worldview that is, pitting groups against each other. I don't think about it that way. It's not a zero-sum game. This is a situation when 1 + 1 can equal 3. We are all better off when folks can live their best lives. Vote no.
The member from Anoka, Representative Niska.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you, Representative Scott, for bringing this amendment. Obviously, you know, it's real simple. This is a question about whether biological sex exists, or whether it's real, and whether it has any relevance in our legal system. And obviously, for many reasons, it does have relevance in our legal system. And having biological women have legal protections does not take away from my protections, does not take away from anyone's protections. It's not about pitting one group of people against another. It's just a question of, does biological sex exist? Is it a real thing? And is it something that the government should recognize as being a real thing? And we've heard some really mixed messages from folks opposing this amendment, and it's really confusing, and I think it's important that we get a little bit of clarity. So Representative Herr, the author of the bill, Representative Scott she said your amendment is not necessary because it's already allowed, pointing to language about strict scrutiny. But then we heard another member argue that this amendment is not necessary because it's not a good outcome, because if I got the words right, trans women should legally and morally be in women's prisons. And so that causes me concern, and I would like to get some clarity from the author of the bill if she will yield.
She will yield. Representative Niska.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And Representative Herr, you said that you pointed to the language that refers to strict scrutiny, and as Representative Robbins correctly pointed out, that is the highest standard that the state must meet in order to justify, I guess, this sex-based distinction under your amendment. And so my question for you, Representative Herr, as the author of this constitutional amendment, is whether the state could legally exclude or have a prison in which only biological women were allowed in that prison under your amendment, or if you, as was said, agree that trans women should legally be in women's prisons.
Representative Herr.
Madam Speaker, Representative Niska, I've already stated this, that what is actually being asked within this amendment is already allowed by the state to do what the amendment proposes, and so this amendment is not necessary, and I recommend a no vote.
Representative Niska.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I would have a follow-up question if Representative Herr will yield.
She will yield. Representative Niska.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And Representative Herr, respectfully, I don't think you answered my question, which is I'm asking what your constitutional amendment would, what the result of it would be in terms of the question of a prison where the state of Minnesota is attempting to have a prison limited to biological women. Is that something that would be allowed under your constitutional amendment without the Scott Amendment?
Representative Herr.
Madam Speaker, just 1 second. Madam Speaker, Representative Niska, I don't know how much more clearly I can state that the state is already allowed to do what this amendment states. And so if the state does it or not, they just have to be able to do it with it requires that the state use the least restrictive means of achieving a compelling government interest. And so they're already allowed to do what Representative Scott's amendment is asking to be able to do. And that's why I don't know how much more clear I can be. If you would like, I would actually defer to Representative Pinto, who could probably answer your question. Maybe I'm not understanding your lawyerly way of what you might be wanting from me. And so Representative Pinto, I'm sure, would be more than willing to answer that question for you.
Representative Niska.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you, Representative Herr, I guess, for that answer. The problem is that you're asking us to pass a constitutional amendment, and you're not willing to explain to the people of Minnesota what the result of that would be in a very specific scenario, in a very specific question about whether or not the state would be allowed to recognize and protect sex-based distinctions in the prison context. And you know, yesterday, it's interesting, yesterday you recognized or you referred to that a lot of people smart in constitutional law have been consulted on the language in your constitutional amendment. And in particular, it seems like the group that's been the biggest driver in pushing the constitutional amendment, the folks who were at actually the lawyer who was at the testifying table with you when you had questions about this in the Rules Committee, is from a group called Gender Justice. And Gender Justice is actually the firm that's suing the state of Minnesota in order to get biological males to be able to be in women's prisons. And so it's very concerning that you won't give a straight answer as to whether or not the state could meet the strict scrutiny standard, again, the highest legal standard possible, in order to exclude those who have the biological sex of male from a prison of biological women, people who are of the biological sex of women. But, you know, members, a lot of the discussion here has been about the concept of gender identity, and it's really missed the big point, which is gender identity. You can embrace the idea of gender identity all you want, but none of that eliminates the relevance or the fact about biological sex. Biological sex is a real thing. It's been a real thing for all of human history. It is a real thing in science. The party of science should recognize that biological sex exists. Whether or not you want to also add to that a concept of gender identity. Biological sex exists and is a relevant fact. Look at human performance in sports. Look at human reproduction. Biological sex exists and is real, and is something that the government should recognize as being something that's real. And if that's not enough for you, think about the sentence, the billboard the tweet sentence you hear over and over again, we heard it yesterday on the floor, trans women are women. Trans women are women. That sentence is at war with itself. Trans women, that term only makes sense in reference to the idea that there is women as a biological sex category and that there is a gender reference to them, to that makes sense based on the idea of women as a biological sex category. Trans women are women. The first two words have an assumption in them that's at war with the last two words. It's not a logically coherent sentence. So, if you want to have gender identity, gender expression written into the state constitution, fine, but you have to also have in there an acknowledgement that in addition to the concept of gender, there is in fact a concept of biological sex that is a real thing, that is relevant. That's relevant for all of the reasons that have been discussed. So, Representative Scott, thank you for this amendment. It is important, it is necessary. It is necessary that the state is able to recognize sex-based distinctions without having to meet the same standard of strict scrutiny that the state would have to meet in order to discriminate on the basis of race, for example. It is important. It is a good amendment. I urge members to support it.
The member from Sibley, Representative Harder.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. And thank you, Representative Scott, for this amendment. If you remember, I think it was a few weeks ago, I believe that we were talking about House File 4300. And I mentioned in this chamber about that I was assaulted. Do you remember that? And Mr. Police Officer, my savior, came and helped me. And he took me to a woman's shelter. And this amendment, and this is where I come into play, that this is a good amendment. And it talks about to protect sex-based distinction facilities and programs, and in my mind, that is a woman's shelter. Can you imagine anyone, anywhere being assaulted, taken to a facility where there are men there or men who think that they're women or whatever the case might be? It doesn't matter. If you want to be a boy and become a girl become a boy, that's your business. I have nothing against that. Do what you want. It's your life. But when you have been traumatized by that incident and you're taken to a place where there's someone who is there who either was the opposite sex or whatever, imagine what that person could potentially be going through. This bill, and I'll mention, there was a amendment as a DE5, and it was the one that went to the original ERA, which is the one that we should be voting on. This is the one that we should be taking to the people. Not this one, in my mind, that's stripping my rights away. And you put a bee in my bonnet, I'll drop the plow. And it won't be just an inch. I'll drop that plow deep. And again, I'm just going to say, in my mind, it does not matter. Everybody has their own life, and you can choose to live it how you want. If you're born one sex and you want to change it, that is your business. I will never tell you what to do. But in this particular amendment, I am going to say that we need to support that. And we need to support women who potentially go into a women's shelter that might not have women. And so I thank you members for standing up and speaking on this particular issue, and I would request that people support this amendment. Thank you.
The member from Dakota, Representative Ryer.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I have many reasons to recommend that you vote against this amendment, as I'll be doing. The first one is just going back to our state constitution. Government is instituted for the security, benefit, and protection of the people. It doesn't say straight people, gay people, trans people, cis people. It is not a slur. It says it is our duty to take care of the security, benefit, and protection of the people. So I will remind us, it's really simple. Trans women are women, trans girls are girls, trans men are men, and trans boys are boys. And like all people referred to in the Constitution, our trans community members deserve protection. It is guaranteed in our Constitution. There is nothing in our Constitution that says we shall put trans people below others for protection. And it's for that very reason that apparently we need to reinforce that, in fact, we do need to protect the rights and safety and well-being of our trans community. Also, I want to go back that the amendment is based on a really false binary of so-called biological sex. And it was only yesterday that our geneticist, Representative Amanda Hemmingson-Yager, has told us all about how that works and what the variations are. And the way I envision it is a continuum. There is not a black and white. There is not a yes or no. There's not an on or off of male and female. There is not a binary. And so where do you cut it off? Where do you say, we shall protect here, we shall not protect there? We need to be realistic about what we know from the science of genetics, science of biology, to know that we can't set up our laws based on false premises. And finally, I just also want to go back to the cis being a slur and just give you a little background here. Cisgender is a way to differentiate between people like me who say, no, my gender identity at birth, I was born and identified as a girl, and I identify as a woman, a queer woman, but a woman. And so I am a cis woman. That's not a slur, that's an identification. It's simply an adjective recognized by the American Psychological Association, the World Health Organization, the American Medical Association, the American Psychiatric Association. Trying to, Elon Musk had a good time trying to turn it into a slur, but it's not a slur. And finally, I want to say, I've spent my time living as a resident in a women's shelter, and I'm going to tell you the last thing I was worried about was whether or not there were trans women or trans girls in the shelter with me. What I cared about was that I was in a place where we all had need, we all needed protection, we all needed to heal, and we were in a place where we looked out for each other. Please vote no.
The member from Crow Wing, Representative Davis.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. So we're looking at an amendment, the A15 amendment. Thank you, Representative Scott, for this amendment. This amendment allows the state to recognize and protect sex-based distinctions in facilities and programs. So, well, let me do this. Would the author of the bill be willing to yield for a question, Madam Speaker?
She will. Representative Davis.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. My question for the author is, if a person born biologically male at birth who identifies as a woman or a trans woman and enters a women's restroom, now this is if this amendment is put on the Constitution, enters a women's restroom at a church and then is not allowed by that church to use the women's restroom, would that violate that person's rights under this amendment?
Representative Herr.
Madam Speaker and Representative Davis, I've made it very clear on this floor that I'm not here to answer hypothetical questions because I don't know the church, I don't know the individual, I don't know the circumstances. But boy, I would hope that if a trans person walked into a church that we would welcome them with open arms. The first time I met a trans person was actually when I was 20 years old at my Methodist church on my college campus, and I had never seen a trans woman before. And I remember thinking that if God brought us both to the same place, that he meant for us to be here together and that we would welcome that person with open arms.
Representative Davis.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. That actually wasn't the question. That wasn't the question of whether or not they'd be welcome with open arms. The question was, would it violate that person's rights under this amendment if they walked into a church, walked into a women's restroom as a biological male, and was not allowed to use that restroom? You won't answer that question, which speaks to the egregiousness of this bill. We are talking about violating people's First Amendment rights under the Constitution, and you can't answer that hypothetical question. It's a very important one, because my concern is that we're going to have a whole lot of churches getting sued for them protecting their conscience. Representative Hudson last night did an excellent job of pointing out how these two viewpoints absolutely conflict with each other. They absolutely do, Representative Herr. I can guarantee you that they do, because I know what many churches believe. And I won't pull it out right now, but I know exactly what this has to say on the subject. They are absolutely at odds with each other. And you are putting the Constitution at odds with each other. And you are opening up, in the state of Minnesota, the state declaring itself as the head of the church and what the church should believe, and litigation coming towards the church, many churches in this state. I will never support this bill for this amendment. I won't, because it doesn't protect all Minnesotans. But when it comes to this amendment, we absolutely need to adopt this amendment. We are talking about people's God-given First Amendment right. And the question I just brought to the author of the bill is so vitally important in protecting those First Amendment rights. And as one of your members pointed out yesterday, that the Minnesota State Constitution has even more protections that it's going to be in conflict with. We've been posed this question for the second time tonight. And this question actually violates our rules, but I guess we're kind of here and there on that. But what would you have trans people do if they are not allowed to be who they are? Well, what would you have Bible-believing Christians and churches do if they're not allowed to be who they are? The fact that you can't answer this question for me tells me that litigation is coming. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
The member from Douglas, Representative Franson.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. Would Representative Herr yield to a question.
She will yield. Representative Franson.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and Representative Herr. So if there is no scientific proof for binary sex, we heard that yesterday from somebody that knows all about genetics, and that trans people must be believed. Okay, we've heard that many, many times. So for the purposes of the actual protections of this unequal rights amendment, how could any court determine if someone's rights were infringed if there's no objective truth? So it is the liar's paradox, and people have been proven to lie for their own gain. So how is a court going to determine if somebody's rights have been infringed?
Representative Herr.
Madam Speaker, Representative Franson, and I just want to, I will answer your question, but I'm going to also answer Representative Davis's question first. And I thought that this was really clear when we put the bill forward for people to understand that actually the constitutional, our Constitution only applies to state actors, and this is not for churches. Churches are not state actors. So you don't have to worry about trans people using your bathrooms in your churches if you don't want them there. You should, but I'm really sorry if you're somebody who doesn't want them there. Representative Franson, to your question, again, so I think that the hypothetical question you're asking me, it makes it really difficult because courts already do that right now. Like, I'm a person of color, and when I'm discriminated against, it's really hard for me to prove that it is because of my race, right? And that's why we have really great court systems that we all, I think in here, believe that our court systems are fair and just, and that is their responsibility, and they would bring forward the evidence of the case, and then that's something that would be tried. So I trust in our court system that they will know how to navigate this just as they do right now when it comes to other classes in which people are discriminated against, including race.
Representative Franson.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I find that very interesting because there's truth for a reason. There's black and there's white. And this issue is extremely gray. And that's why you're elevating one group above biological girls and women. January 24th in 2024, there was a man posing as a transgender woman who raped female prisoners at Rikers Prison. Posing. Wasn't transgender, but claimed to be, and raped prisoners there. It's simple to adopt this amendment to protect women and girls, guaranteeing the rights of biological women and girls. And I'm just going to touch, since we had a few members continue to use the word that is a slur on this House floor. Members, I think that I've asked you many times to respect that. And then I've heard that apparently that my rights do not matter, or my opinions do not matter on this. It appears that your side of the aisle believes that subjective reality should rule. And you have the nerve to tell us or me what I can or cannot be offended by. Now, if you want to know, there was, I'm trying to find my little backup here. The term cisgender itself was coined in English in 1994. And it was by a person by the name of Dana
Madam
DeFosse.
Speaker, point of order.
Representative Hollins, please state your point of order.
Masons 101 says that we must keep our debate confined to the question before the body, and instead of going through what we are talking, the word cisgender, can we please stay focused on the amendment at hand?
Representative Franson, if you can relate your comments to the A15.
Madam Speaker, thank you. We just got a lecture from one of your members on that about why I should not be offended on that word. So at any rate.
Representative Franson, if you want to debate whether cisgender is a slur or not, you would raise to a point of order. You would seek a ruling on a point of order. If it was found against you, then you could appeal, and then that would be the topic of debate. But the debate before the House right now is the A15 amendment. And you're usually pretty good at connecting stories to amendments, so if you could just connect your comments to the amendment, you'll be within the bounds of the debate. Thanks.
Okay, well, the individual that I was mentioning sought a way to refer to non-transgender people that avoided marginalizing transgender people. It didn't come from straight people. So I'm asking, again, to this body to just not refer to us as cisgendered people. Otherwise, if I said I identify as a non-transvestite person, I'm sure your side of the aisle may not find that appropriate. Okay? Thank you.
The member from Minoka, Representative Engen.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Would the author of the bill yield to a question?
She will yield. Representative Engen.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Representative Herr, would your bill protect any and every fully intact person with male genitalia who identifies as a female into a women's prison?
Representative Herr.
Madam Speaker, Representative Engen, can you repeat your question? I'm not quite sure what you're asking me.
Representative Engen.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Representative Herr, if you identify as a female and you have male genitalia, can you simply identify as that female and then you have access to a women's prison?
Representative Herr.
Madam Speaker, Representative Engen, again, that's a hypothetical that I don't know anything about the situation, and so I'm not in the practice of answering hypothetical questions. Understand that the amendment that is before us is asking for certain protections that are already allowed under the state to do so, and so again, I'm just going to reiterate the fact that the state is already allowed to do what this amendment is asking for. Thank you.
Representative Engen.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. You don't seem to know anything about your bill.
Representative Hold on. Representative Engen, the issue before the body is the A15 amendment. Personality is not permitted in debate. And so if you can phrase a question relating to the language of the amendment, the A15 amendment, that's the topic before the body.
Speaker, Representative Herr, I've heard time and time again on this floor that it is a hypothetical to ask you of a situation that would come up if this constitutional amendment is adopted. And you can't tell me what the effect would be. There are judicial ramifications to having passed legislation that affects our Constitution. There are legal ramifications, whether being criminal or civil, that occur when you pass a constitutional ballot referendum that affects everybody in this state. For you to simply say, I don't know, is not sufficient to this entire issue.
Point of order, Madam Speaker.
Representative Jordan.
Madam Speaker, under Mason Section 124, personalities and motives should not be the debate. The debate should be the A15 amendment. And I would ask you to ask members to confine their remarks to the A15 amendment. Thank you.
Members, please focus on the substance of the amendments.
Without this amendment, Madam Speaker, thank you. I'm going to read it's a New York Post article right here. California now must supply women's prisons condoms due to biological men housed in their prisons. The article then goes on to say, Governor Gavin Newsom blurred the lines between men and women, and women's prisons as we once knew them were quietly eliminated in 2021 when California lawmakers passed SB 132. Women now don't feel safe in their own prisons, end quote. We need to know what the effect of your bill is. It is not a hypothetical to ask you otherwise. It is simply asking what the effect of legislation is. There is no such thing as good or bad legislation. There are only trade-offs. And you can't tell us those trade-offs. You can only tell us, I don't know, we'll have to pass it and then figure it out. That is not good policy. That is not good legislation. That is not fair to the people of Minnesota who want to know how this is going to impact their lives. We want to know what is going on. We want to know how we are supposed to act and operate in a society, in a cultural fabric, in a place where this is passed. We won't get an answer Until we get one, these questions will presume. I'd love to know what the effect of your bill is. And until we get that, we will continue to ask. But right now, we have other states in the nation that have adopted similar legislation, and women in prisons don't feel safe. Women in domestic violence shelters don't feel safe. That is wrong. That is sad. And women deserve better than that. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Members, I'm just going to remind the body of a couple sections of Masons you might want to take a look at that we rely on for custom and usage in Minnesota. Section 110, addressing members or presiding officer. The debate shall be addressed to the presiding officer, not to the members. And Section 114, if members wish to ask questions of other members, they do so through the presiding officer. And the idea is to create distance between the personalities in the dispute and keep the focus on the language before the body. So Section 110, Section 114 are a couple sections of Masons that we use to try to keep the debate focused on the issue before the body. The member from Meeker, Representative Gilman.
Thank you so much, Madam Speaker, and thank you for just bringing us back to the heart of the issue here. The A15 again comes in. I'm just going to read it here one more time just so I can get myself centered and grounded here. The state is allowed to recognize and protect sex-based distinctions in facilities and programs. And again, thank you, Representative Harder, for being vulnerable with us, for sharing with us. And I know many in this room and many of your constituents also have had similar horrendous experiences where we are scared. We've had, for me, for example, I may or may not have had people yell at me that are of the opposite sex. I've had things that have happened to me that have been very traumatic. And again, when that's happened, I do not know how my body's going to react to it. I love that you've brought up epigenetics. My mother-in-law, she's still alive, 87 years old, was a prisoner of war in Germany. She was born in Germany, and it's coming back to safe spaces here, because I'm going to talk about Me Too. We all know about that. We all know how we rallied around each other, how we came alongside of folks that were in our situation. And for me, because I am a woman, I identified with my mother-in-law, who came out of the woodwork and told me things about her history as a little 7-year-old girl being put in a boxcar with so many people she could not sit down. Her little sister, 4 years younger, her mother, and many people in this boxcar. She's Prussian. She was captured by the Russians. This is real life. This is a true story. And my bad ass mother-in-law, I'm going to say that because she's amazing. She's a fighter. She's tenacious. She's incredible. But she held this deep in her heart and didn't tell anybody until the Me Too movement came out. I'm standing here right now knowing that there's women in this chamber, men in this chamber, non-binary people in this chamber, people, human beings that have had experiences that were put on them that were not supposed to be put on them, that other people splatted on you and me and others in this room that were not intended to happen. When there is a debate going on that is so confusing to us here, how is a judge or a jury supposed to figure it out? How are they supposed to figure it out if we can't frickin' figure it out? I had Teddy on the steps today. Thanks to Teddy. I don't know where you're at, Teddy, but it was a cool thing that Teddy came up to me. She's been gay as long as the day is long. She is just so radical and cool. And she just said, what is happening with this ERA bill? And this amendment, how it ties into this amendment, the A15, is so vital because she goes, safe spaces need to happen. Opportunities for me to thrive need to happen. So I'm going to bring you back to my mother-in-law. The only reason that I am married to the most amazing man who got to visit me today, because he misses me, is because her last name is Kempka. The train was stopped. My mother-in-law, Hane Laura Kempka, her little sister, her mother, and one other gentleman whose last name was Kempka were pulled off the train. You want to know why? Because her uncle was Hitler's chauffeur driver. So if you Google Eric Kempka, that's my husband's great uncle. Crazy story. She hid it locked into her heart forever until the Me Too movement happened. I am standing here for all the women that are desiring safe spaces for them and safe spaces for young boys and men. We don't need men colonizing women's safe spaces. She said to me, with her fierce tenacity, thank God, she didn't even like me at times. My mother-in-law did not like me at times. She thought I was too mouthy. Look at this big mouth I have, she said. All right? And then she also told me when I was in college, because I was dating her son since I've been 16 years old. I'll be married 30 years this year.
Point of order, Madam Speaker.
Bring it.
Representative Frederick.
Mason's 101, debate must be defined before the question before the body. So far we've heard about lunch plans and genealogy and how debate is confusing, none of which has been pertaining to the A15 amendment.
Representative Gilman, if you can land the plane and please address the presiding officer. Representative
Thank you.
Gilman.
I'm going to keep my eyes fixed on you. I can do this because they like to do this in the Senate, so let's just do that, all right? They're not working right now, people. We are doing the work of all Minnesotans here. Thank you. I'll be coming in hot here. I'm passionate about this because I love human beings. All means all. Equal rights must include everyone. And thank God I have this incredible example of a mother-in-law that has fought through such hard things. So when Me Too happened and she said, you know what? This is how she just quietly just like let me into her world. Okay, because we all know people. We all have stories. We all have them. We all have experiences. We hear about all these incredible bills that come before us because we have connections with people. So, Madam Speaker, the A15, why it means so much to me and why it means so much to so many others is my mother-in-law quietly spoke to me, all of my abusers are dead. She said that to me. She was taken to another concentration camp where she got to live. And how she told me of her experience and hadn't even told her own children of her experiences is I was homeschooling our 5 kids. Call that crazy, homeschool 5 kids. And it's so cool and fun, but we were doing a really great experiment talking about just life and how we can travel from one thing to another. So what the A15 does to this is she showed me that it took her 2 years to get to her father because he was employed by the military. And she said in that process, she had been under grave danger. Do you think there was safe spaces in concentration camps? Do you think right now going on in our world there's safe spaces for women across the world? How about right here in Minnesota? The A15 allows for us to ensure that we have safe spaces for women and that they never need to tell these horrific stories to their future generations. Thank you.
The member from St. Louis, Representative Zalesnikar.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Members,
I think this is really pretty simple. When you peel the onion back, we're talking about assuring that people who are born as a biological woman, that their safety is not second to any rights that we put in place through this ERA that's being presented to Minnesota in 2024. And the reality is, as a woman, I have a uterus. As a woman, we have eggs. As a man, you don't. I've looked up everything on biology, and no offense to anybody. I've asked doctors. That is one thing that regardless of any choices that any of us make in this room will not change that. I, as a woman, will be able to possibly deliver a baby. On the other hand, if Representative Dotson...
Point of order. Representative Lee, for what purpose do you rise?
Masons 101, the question before the body is the A15. We are not in biology class.
Members, it sometimes can be frustrating to have people take a long time to make a point. So if we can do each other a favor and allow each other a little grace to make points, but when we're telling stories, to try to keep our stories as tightly related to the amendment as possible. Both sides of the aisle could do a little bit better to focus the debate. Representative Zalesnikar.
My point is Madam Speaker, thank you. My point is pretty simple, that regardless of how I choose to identify, whatever gender I want to identify as, I will have a baby, I will have ovaries, and somebody else will not. And I only say that because we can't define sex anymore, and the federal ERA, which would have been simple to adopt in the DE5, clearly says the equality of rights under the law shall not be denied or abridged by the U.S. or by the state on the account of sex. But we are in a point where we can't determine sex, so therefore on the sense of safety for prisons, rape centers, domestic abuse, a YMCA locker room, a high school locker room, a middle school locker room, we can't assure that a woman can be safe. And that isn't to be offensive to anybody's personality or anybody's conduct. It's just simply saying, look, you're going to have a different bone structure than me. You're going to have a different strength than I will have. You may have body parts that I don't want to see in a locker room. I will never produce testosterone. And I could get injections. And maybe it will change me, and I'm sure it would. And I don't have a problem with that. What I have a problem with is I simply want to know I'm safe in the places, and I think that's all women are asking for. And that wasn't a question 50 years ago when ERA was starting, and these questions were happening, and long before that in the 20s, it was a conversation that was black and white. We are not in a black and white conversation right now. And that's okay if that's what we want to have. But when you look at the simple question here, when you're looking at safe spaces, which is what the A15 is about, it shouldn't be this hard to determine that we're different. It just shouldn't. And we've said in this body many places, our job is to protect children, our job is to protect seniors, our job is to protect adults. It's to protect everybody. Equal rights is to protect everybody. If I commit a crime and I go to prison, the last thing on my mind is that I got to worry if I'm bunking with somebody that I would possibly not be able to protect myself or be safe. And if I've been raped by a man, or I've been abused by a man, even if they identify as a female now and they've got their body parts, how is a woman supposed to handle that in these settings? Explain to me how that makes any sense for the state of Minnesota. We protect women from the people that have abused them, but we want to subject them to that type of repeat environment. As if their feelings don't matter. They're not supposed to, because there's some label for them. I'm sorry, but they probably aren't going to feel inclusive in a setting where they're in a cubicle jail cell and they don't know if they feel safe. Or they're in a rape center. And so, Representative Harder, thank you, because I know a lot of people who've been molested, who've been raped, and don't want to have to worry about this for themselves. And so this isn't about any of us in this chamber. This is just about basic safety. And it depends on the person, just like all of our behavior. If you're going to shoot somebody, if you're going to rape somebody, I don't know who's going to do that either. But I do know there's bone structure differences. I do know there's lung capacity differences. I do know that there's testosterone. I do know that there's basic things. Whether we want to admit it or not in 2024 really isn't my problem. And it has nothing to do about being inclusive. It has to do with having some sense on about safety. That's all people want, is safety in these spaces. And some of these safe spaces are where people could be vulnerable. And so maybe it wouldn't affect any of us in this room, but I haven't been raped. I haven't been molested. I haven't had that baggage to carry around my whole life. Somebody else might. That's all I'm saying, is we have to consider all these scenarios. And to Representative Hurst's point, no, we don't know all the scenarios, but we've said many times, if it happens one time, it's too much. It shouldn't happen one time. We don't want anybody to be assaulted. We don't want to have anybody have a negative outcome. And even if the person didn't do something to them physically in these confined spaces, maybe the person just wants to be with people that they don't, in their mind, their perspective could be completely different by their life experiences that don't mirror mine. And all of our life experiences are different. But people are concerned on how this is going to affect them. And I think we as a legislative body just have to be very clear on how this is going to impact people. And I ask this body to consider this. I think this amendment makes sense.
Madam Speaker, point of order.
Representative Nash.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'd request a call of the House.
Representative Nash requests a call of the House. Are there 10 hands? Seeing 10 hands, there will be a call of the House. The clerk will take the roll on the call.
wide open to get people back. Some of our people are not bad. Speaker left the board open just like that until that is asked. You kind of
Members, we are in a quorum call.
Madam Speaker, point of order.
Representative Nash.
Madam Speaker, I will withdraw my call of the House.
Representative Nash withdraws the call of the House. The clerk will close the roll. Representative Demuth, would you like to make a motion for a brief recess?
Thank you,
Representative Demuth.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I move that we would recess for approximately 30 minutes.
Representative Demuth requests a recess for approximately 30 minutes. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed, please say no. The motion prevails. The House stands in recess.
Thank you.